Welcome to In the House. My name is Mark Shiver. As always, extremely excited to have you watching and listening to our cast here. And I'm very excited that joining us today is Representative Jimmy Dixon. He represents District 4, currently Duplin and Onslow counties. That'll be changing to Duplin and Wayne counties in November. But he's in his sixth term, and he is the senior chairman of agriculture and agriculture appropriations in the House, vice chairman of the appropriations committee, doing a lot. He's also a farmer, so he knows how to work hard and pray a lot, I'm sure. So Representative Dixon, welcome to In the House.
Thank you, Mark. I appreciate the opportunity to chat with you about a few things today that we feel like are important to the people of District 4 as well as the people all across North Carolina.
Well, let's go all across North Carolina as we start, because the Duplin Times had a fairly substantial article in it a couple of days ago that says Clifford's Law protocols are now in place. Now, people might be wondering what in the world is Clifford's Law, but this is a law that you were a bill that you were a primary sponsor on, and it passed the House, it passed the Senate, it was signed by the governor, and it is a very meaningful piece of legislation. I'll give you an opportunity. Tell us, what is Clifford's Law?
Okay, doke. Let me just preface it by saying many of us may have forgotten at this point how difficult it was to visit family, loved ones during the pandemic. In other words, visitation was extremely curtailed. I began to get horror stories from across my district, and other members did across the state. Why can't I visit? And just to make a long story short, it just didn't seem right to me that our people should be confined without many of them died without any family. Had a particular case here, a good friend of mine in Kenansville. Her brother had been in casual center in Kinston for about 53 years.
Wow.
Just the nicest guy you could think of, very friendly, but mentally deficient. She went a year and 2 months not able to see him.
My goodness.
He lost 40 pounds in a few months. He did not understand why he couldn't have his sister, who had been to see him 53 years in a row every Sunday. And so that was the impetus for it. And I talked with her and told her what I wanted to try to do. And if we were successful, I was going to call it Clifford's Law in honor of Clifford Jernigan, the name of this young man. And so I reached out to DHHS and some other people, Donnie Lamberth and other members of the DHHS committee. They thought it was a good idea, and we proceeded with it and were successful. It passed almost unanimous in the House, and then it passed almost unanimously in the Senate. What I say that this bill is a safety net, so that never again, regardless of the state of emergency that causes visitation to be curtailed, anyone in a long-term care facility, when they go in, appoints one regular and one alternate visitor, that under whatever circumstances of restrictions there are, that visitor or the alternate visitor gets to see this person for a minimum of twice a month.
Well, you know what? That was needed, Representative Dixon, because you're right. A lot of us don't even think of COVID today. It's in our rearview mirror, unless you happen to get it or know somebody that does. But that was a heck of a bad situation for so many people across the state because of the governor's emergency executive order. And so this was, I call it meaningful legislation, legislation that touches people right where they are.
We went too far in quarantining healthy people.
Mm-hmm.
And with the sophistication that we have now, there's no reason that we can't just have this as an absolute ground floor minimum opportunity for visitation. And as you may know, there was sort of a companion bill in the Senate that addresses the same kinds of issues with hospitals. Hospitals are so many more patients that I wanted to concentrate on the most vulnerable people in our society. And it was those people who were completely confined 24/7, 365, and make sure that they were never again left alone in their misery. And many hundreds of them died without family members being able to visit them.
Boy, that's a shame. You know, I can recall my wife, before she passed away, was working at an assisted living facility, and they had a little gathering there on a Sunday afternoon, and I went with her. And Representative Dixon, I was struck by how many people there just looked lonely. And this was before COVID. So what you just said about a guy who has his sister come every Sunday, man, he had to be looking forward to that. And as you said, he couldn't understand, why can't my sister come see me? And the human contact is so important in these situations. So as a citizen of the state, I appreciate you thinking about this and getting this legislation passed. I really do.
Good. And I'm optimistic that the protocols that they put in place are going to work.
Yeah. Well, good. Well, moving to talk about your district changing a little bit. You've been serving the people there for quite some time now. It's not that long of a drive for you, as it say, somebody from Mitchell County, but still a bit of a drive. And it's long days, sometimes long nights, yet you're still serving. What is it about serving that, or what is it that compels you to serve? You know, you could easily say, well, I've put in my time, I'm done, but you continue to want to help the people. So there's got to be something of a fire inside to help others.
22 years ago, I became very disgruntled with local property taxes, the way they were being used and the escalation. My property taxes went up almost 40% in a very short period of time. And this is the way it happened. I found myself being very critical of my county, encouraging my children to get their high school education, go to college, and get out of Duplin County. And one morning I met the guy in the mirror, and it looked back at me and said, "Are you crazy? You're encouraging your children to move from home. This is where you went to high school, played football, was fortunate enough to get a football scholarship to Wake Forest, that many people here helped you. Get a life and either quit moaning and groaning or get involved." And so I got involved. I went to every county commissioner meeting and every board of education meeting for 10 years.
Wow.
And then the opportunity came about in 2010 that Skip Sam and some others, Tom Tillis, reached out to me to see if I was interested in running for the North Carolina House. I thought about it, discussed it with my wife, and then I thought about my 7 grandchildren. And so knew I was going to miss a lot of time with them. But the number one reason that I'm in Raleigh is because I have 7 grandchildren, and I know that other people have grandchildren they're concerned about. And so that was the impetus for me to going to Raleigh to start with. I think I'm the second Republican to ever get elected from Duplin County, the only Republican to ever get reelected to the House. And by and large, it's been a magnificent experience.
Well, I know that you have represented your constituents well. I know that you have a desire to see people not be taken advantage of by government, but for government to help people. And in that regard, as a farmer, when government and farming and agriculture intersect, what is that like for farmers? I know you probably appreciate as little interference as possible, but a question I had, for example, is you're involved with the agriculture appropriations, and as farmers, when you're thinking about putting a budget together, what do you want the state to do as a farmer?
Well, we are very fortunate in North Carolina. In my opinion, we've got the best Commissioner of Agriculture in the nation, in Steve Troxler. And so he's done a magnificent job over the years. We farmers want a level, fair playing field, and they don't want the goal line to change in the middle of the game. And so that's been one of my attempts, is to level the playing field so that the proper measured attention can be given to the farming community as it relates to regulations, as it relates to policies. Senator Jackson and I have cooperated on an annual Farm Act ever since we've been in the General Assembly. It hasn't been without a few bumps here and there, but he starts it over in the Senate, and we reach out to all of the stakeholders. What do we need? What do we need to change? And then we refine that as the process goes through. To give you an example to how simple it could be up to how complicated it could be. When I went to Raleigh, when Brent and I went to Raleigh, it was not legal to haul 2 round bales of hay side by side on a trailer because it overlapped the side of the trailer.
Right.
So one provision in the Farm Act corrected that. Then you move on. That's very simple. You move on to these outrageous court cases that many out-of-state law firms begin to attack our livestock industry.
Right.
They would recruit clients to make exaggerated at best and very untruthful claims. And so we work towards improving our right to farm legislation in North Carolina. And our right to farm legislation mirrored the national or the federal. It is presumed in our Constitution and later rules and regulations and law that we have a right to farm unencumbered by strenuous regulations imposed by government. And so one of the major things that we did, Farmer A or Neighbor A sues the farmer that's producing hogs. The punitive damages were out of this world.
Yeah.
And so we said, okay, if there is really nuisance, we changed the amount, and that would be 3 times what the value of your property is.
Okay.
And then, of course, compensatory damages have always been 3 times the punitive damages. Okay. So that was a big help in discouraging frivolous lawsuits. By the way, that was, I believe, in 2015, and about 4 months ago, it finally passed the last court test and is now law.
Wow. How about that? Well, God, there's so many things I'd love to ask you about farming. and try to keep these interviews to around 20, 25 minutes. So uh, these cases, as you said, were often frivolous at best. When you came to Raleigh in 2011, after having been elected, the Republicans were in the majority for the first time in 100 years or more, or whatever. And you
140 years.
140 years. Gee whiz. Here you guys are. And instead of being able to pop the corks on the champagne and run through the streets and, just celebrate, you had to roll up your sleeves and get your pencils out because not to be political, but the Democrats had left a $3 billion shortfall in the state budget. And I know from having worked there in 2011 that the state health plan was in complete disarray. The Employment Security Commission was also in disarray. And there was a lot to do, Representative Dixon. And how did you guys come together and say, this is what we're going to do to fix this? Because you did fix it.
Yes, we did. And I think I can produce some evidence of that, Mark. First of all, we were very unified. The old-time members of the House and Senate were very dedicated and unified in gaining that majority. I think we had 67 in the House that year. We increased it a little bit the next election. But people have probably heard the condition of things we're in, so they're about tired of hearing it back in 2010. But very bad, very bad. Very little in the rainy day fund, $3 billion deficit, $2.5 billion federal unemployment. We can go on and on and on. What I want to do, Mark, and I haven't heard this much, so maybe it'll be of some unique value with this type of podcast. Suppose we had left the tax rates exactly like they were in 2011.
Okay.
Hadn't changed them or anything. This is what we have left for the people of North Carolina. In personal income taxes, we would have taken $11.4 billion more dollars. In corporate income taxes, we would have taken $5.8 billion more dollars. In sales and use taxes, we would have taken $12.4 billion more dollars. Wow. Franchise tax is $1.2 billion, and other tax changes $1 billion. Now, in case you didn't get that added up, that's about $35 billion a year that we've left on the table.
Wow.
And what has happened as a result of that? Every single year that I've been up there, we've had a surplus, a budget surplus, which means we collected more money than we spent. Okay. This year, after cutting taxes like that, leaving that much money on the board, going from a 7.5% income tax, personal income tax rate, down to 4.99, going to eventually go to 4.2, 7.5% corporate income tax, down now below 3%, going to 0 in 5 years.
Wow.
What has that produced? This current year, we have a $6 billion surplus. $2 billion of that should be recurring. We've increased our rainy day fund from almost nothing in 2010 to $4.75 billion in the rainy day fund. And so one thing right after the other, but here is the simple analysis. We cut taxes, established reasonable regulations. It has created the best economic climate of any state in the nation, as is portrayed by recent of all CNBC.
Yep.
So it's the best place to do business, and we can say more and more. But reduce taxes, increase revenue, and we're in very, very sound physical condition at this time.
Well, that's exciting, and I appreciate my taxes going down. I don't know anybody that wants their taxes to go up, or at least I hope they don't. but it's really been quite amazing. And today, actually yesterday, Business Facilities Magazine said North Carolina has the best business climate in the country. As you mentioned, CNBC, best place to do business. Moody's, well respected, said we're way ahead of the rest of the nation economically. I thought of a question I haven't asked anybody else. I'll ask you this. About halfway through this journey that has been 10 or 11 years now of cutting taxes and reducing spending, I recall a lot of think tanks saying that this was not sustainable. You just can't keep doing this. And yet, here we are. Did you guys ever start to worry in the middle of all of this and think, we better quit doing this?
Absolutely not. We sat there in 2011 and we heard that the draconian tax cuts and policies that were being imposed on the people of North Carolina, the draconian moves that we were making was going to ruin the economy of North Carolina. We just smiled and went on and trudged our way through it. And we've produced this great economy that we're enjoying right now. But there is a portent of stormy weather if we're not diligent, because this inflation that we're experiencing right now, the recession that we're in, is going to be, I think, broader and deeper than many people think it's going to be. And we are well positioned to be able to weather the storm. Don't think we're going to have to furlough teachers. I don't think we're going to have reversions. My county received, let's say, $100,000 from the General Assembly for education. And then there was a footnote at the bottom. Oh, by the way, send $25,000 of that back. That's called a reversion.
Wow.
We ended that immediately. We quit wasting the Highway Trust Fund and many things like that that allows us to do what we need to do in the necessities of government.
Let me talk to you about inflation from your position, not as a representative, but as a farmer. The food starts when you guys plant something in the ground, and prices going up is certainly out of your control. You have to raise, farmers, not you personally, but farmers have to raise prices in order to stay afloat. They don't want to do that, I'm sure, but you can't, have a hen house full of chickens and pay the electricity cost or the fuel cost that's associated with that. You can't feed cattle if the diesel fuel to run your tractors out there is $5, $6 a gallon, without raising prices so that you can continue to provide food for North Carolina and America. So how does the farmer feel when you're in a situation like this?
That what you just outlined is the catch-22 question. Farmers don't get to decide what they get for their product. We don't get to raise the price. The market dictates the price of corn, the price of soybeans, the live cost of chickens, price that we get paid for chickens and turkeys. So we don't get to pick those kinds of things. We must try to control our cost, because we don't control what we're going to get for the product.
Right.
And when we have increases in fertilizer and diesel in double up to 60 and 70% increases in 1 year, it's ultimately going to show up in the supermarket. But the sad thing about it is those increases in the supermarket don't translate into increases for the farmer. Let me interject one thing relative to one of the greatest things that has happened in the General Assembly for farm families. I forgot what year it was, but we did away with the death tax, the estate tax,
right,
referred to as the death tax. And so it's unbelievably an advantage for farmers with the price of land and
Oh,
everything now. So a man works all his life. He accumulates value in his land. He passes on, leaves it to his children, and they have to sell the farm to pay the taxes on it. The estate tax is gone. That is long-range security for our farm families across North Carolina.
absolutely. And I personally think that was one of the best things that you guys accomplished. And so I know that people appreciate that, who are in a position of having had to pay that in the past, and now they don't have to pay attorneys and high-priced CPAs to figure out what their estate taxes are going to be. You guys have helped people immeasurably with that, so that's good, and we appreciate that for sure. As you look towards next year, one thing you guys did was set aside some money to deal with inflation. In other words, if you're building a building now and all of a sudden the price of lumber or the price of steel or the price of concrete, whatever, goes up, you set aside some money in a fund to be able to address those inflationary costs. But have you thought about next session yet and what that might look like if we're still in an inflationary environment?
Of course, we all have, and we've talked about that, of course, in caucus. We get criticized many times for pointing out that we've got a $6 billion surplus. Mm-hmm. I remember the sadness on many teachers' faces when they got furloughed.
Oh, yeah.
The imposition of a temporary sales tax of 1 cent, which was $1 billion a year, yeah, that we had to do away with that temporary sales tax. Governor Perdue and her people put it in. We truly made it temporary because we took it off. So it can be, and it may be tough on us, but we're positioned well to handle the circumstances that come. If the recession is lighter than we think, then we'll be in a position to better catch up on our infrastructure and so forth. You know, we dedicated a portion of our sales tax now to highway fund and repair and maintenance of highway. Right. I don't know if that's going to be a permanent answer to the decrease in gasoline taxes. You know, our gas tax is no longer going to pay the bill. We've got a lot of highways in North Carolina. Yeah. So we've got to be creative there. But out of concern for transportation and so forth, that's one of the things that we have adjusted to take some sales tax money and put it towards our highway maintenance. We're well positioned. And yes, we think about it.
Well, that's good to know, comforting to know as a citizen. I just have gone over my time, so I'm going to have to let you go, Representative Dixon. But I wanted to say this to you in the way of last thoughts. When you say something, I think that there is a huge amount of credibility. I think you have earned that. I think people respect you. I think they listen when you speak. And I want you to know that I think you're doing an absolutely tremendous job representing your district, your constituents, as well as the entire state. I appreciate all that you do, and I appreciate that you've made yourself available for our time here in the House. So thank you, and you're serving well, sir.
Thank you, Mark, and I'll leave you with this thought. This is what the farmers are going to do. In 1859, Abraham Lincoln pointed out that it was both a profit and a pleasure to produce two where there was but one. Farmers are going to continue their effort to produce two where there was one to feed a hungry nation, and we just ask the government not to change the goal line. Tell us where the goal line is, and we'll meet it. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. You have a great day.
And you do too, Mark. Thanks. Mm-hmm.